Hello, my name is Susie Del Campo, and I'm mom of two middle school girls. And for the last year, all the parents of District 5 with all the parents of the DOE District 2 have been fighting to reverse what happened in the pandemic. That was that we lost the priority to our high schools of the DOE District 2, which affects mostly your district. We have sent over 8,000 of emails. We have asked the DOE, we have foiled them, we got the data, we got every single thing. We have fought it, and unfortunately, candidate Menini is not here. She has checked out completely. She never supported us. So the problem that we have now is that the closest high school to Roosevelt Island, it's Elroy, that it's 20 minutes away. 20 minutes away. And the majority of the students that they have now come from Astoria with about 75 per grade, and the amount of students from District 2, it's under 25. What that means, that our kids, our Roosevelt Island kids, cannot go to their zone middle schools because there are not any. We have to fight with all the city, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, and Brooklyn. They have district high schools, zone high schools, so they have priority over them. And they got BART, that is a new one from Bronx and from Brooklyn. Queens has another one that are brand new, but they all want our District 5 high schools. So our kids no longer have a high school to go to. They are displaced to all around the city, sometimes to high schools that they demand that Chinese should be learned to graduate from high school, and that's not good. Sometimes they're sent to schools that are extremely dangerous and 2 hours away from public transportation, so that's 4 hours per day of our kids in the system. And I want to know, how are you gonna support us to convince the chancellor to revert the situation, to give us District 5, that is the DOE District 2, back our high schools for our kids? Because the reason that they gave us that we are entitled and rich, that's not the case, and this room proves it. So I want to know from you how you're gonna help us out.
Okay, before candidates answer that, can I just ask one question? You had said the closest high school is, I didn't hear the name of that school.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh, Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's on 76 between
Yep, I knew
Durham
that.
and First.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Frank, I have a request, and it's not an issue. Could it be that the speakers get on the other side of that and face us? Because what you spoke about was very important, and I understand for you. But I think if she was facing us, we would be able to hear.
How about this? How about if we move the table back 5 feet or so, and then you'd be able to see them?
Yeah, that's okay.
Does that work?
Find out.
Okay, we'll try. Okay, so one of you, this I guess to direct it to both of you. I'm throwing a point. Okay.
My son is going to high school this year, and my other son is going to be going to high school next year. So as a mother, as a parent, I also do not want my children traveling 20 minutes or going to a high school that is in a bad neighborhood that would be deemed unsafe or taking multiple transit, public transit. I worry, just like you. I apologize, but I'm not familiar with what's been happening with your school. I am very familiar with Eleanor Roosevelt. It's very difficult for a child to get accepted to that school. They have to have a 90 average. It's a lottery. I don't know the dynamic of what is happening, to be honest with you, but as a mother and as a mother of two kids that are the same age going to high school, I would pledge to do the right thing. I would pledge to take it up to where it needs to be taken up and be very relentless in finding a solution. I just want to be able to more understand what is happening and the reason why they took the schools away from you. I'm just lost in understanding that.
Because during COVID, they want to promote ways to our high schools away to be fair to neighborhoods that were not in a good economical level in other boroughs.
I get it, yeah,
So
they've been
go
doing
to
that,
the
yeah.
rich neighborhoods.
Yeah, so that needs to be reviewed by an oversight body, obviously. It's impacting safety and, quality of education for kids that are local here, so
That's your.
that's my answer.
You wanna?
Yeah, I see two separate issues in your questions. I'll try to address them as convincing as
If you could
possible.
speak a little louder, because I think just so the people on both sides would like to hear your answer.
I'll start with the first issue of being heard, right? Which is an issue I hear a lot in this campaign. Constituents feel like their voice isn't being heard. There's one of the candidates in this primary here tonight, one is not. I'll accept it. When it comes to education, we have a scenario where city government, and this permeates into other areas of city government, but particularly in education, where instead of fixing the education system for students in the South Bronx, or in Queens, or in Staten Island, to make it equitable in their own communities, and do the work, roll up the sleeves to make the public school system work, they have then catered to say, we're going to put students in this one school that is working, right? A lot of students in the Upper East Side and in our city who are white, affluent students have left our public school system. That is just a fact, that's data, right? Because their parents have the resources to send them to private schools at the tune of $60,000 and $70,000 a year. And honestly, as a parent, if I'm looking at the state of public education in our city and having to make a decision about what I want for my child, and those families have the resources, I understand why they choose what they do for their students. But what it's created is an environment where those families, working class families like ours, are fighting for what's left over in the public school system, right? And it's time that the New York City DOE gets serious about fixing the system citywide, so that students in the South Bronx have really good schools to go to, so that we're not fighting over one or two quality high schools in a more affluent neighborhood.
Okay, let me just ask, was there a rebuttal or any follow-up to his comments? No? Okay, and then since there was nothing she said, then there's no rebuttal to your statement. Thank you for the question. Next, again, please say your name and.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julius Marinov. I'm a 16-year-old student who attends the New York City area, and I've been living on the island for around 3 years. I work as a student leader in an initiative known as Journalism for All, which is within the Youth Journalism Coalition. And one of our major points is to focus on the issues between public schools with the haves and have-nots. Most schools in our city do not have journalism programs. And the reason why journalism programs are important for all students is because journalism is how you get students and people like myself here to have a voice, to allow students to decide, hey, I see a problem in this area, how about someone comes and fixes it? My apologies. And so many students, especially students that are economically disadvantaged, students of color, they do not have those same opportunities that many upper class schools have. So this is directed to both of you. Both of you care about the welfare of our students. How do you think you will allow younger constituents within our district and as a whole, our city, be able to let their voices be heard?
So I hear you. I went to public school all my life. I went to a high school in Staten Island in one of the worst neighborhoods. Part of what a city council person has is they have discretionary funds, and we heard Julie mention they have reallocated $1.7 million of her discretionary funds and what she did with it. There's way more than 1.7 that is allotable, and part of my platform, as I was trying to make my time, I said that I would fund enrichment programs for public school students because I was in your position. I was a public school student. The enrichments program that I believe we need, and that is a really good one as well, but also, I didn't travel outside the country until I was in my 30s. I didn't see the world. I didn't get to experience different cultures, and I think when you are a public school student, you come from a household that gives you those opportunities, and they're so important because they'll shape your mind. And basically, we want to invest in students who are going to be the future leaders of tomorrow. We want to broaden their horizons, give them opportunity to experience different worlds, different, opportunities. So this discretionary budget for public school students encompasses all of District 5 public schools and will be allocated per school district for enrichment programs. And that would include programs such as this, because I believe that is also an enrichment program.
Thank you.
I think that was the question you're asking, how it would help incorporate your voice into the process, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I would, as city council person, create a youth advisory committee. When I was your age in high school, I was a pretty weird kid. I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce at 14. Not a lot of my friends were doing that. But I had a lot of opportunity to engage with elected officials and understand the process, right? And as a strategic advisor for public school district superintendents, when I was helping them create their strategic improvement plans, we were essentially centering the student voice in all of those decisions, right? Because you have a perspective in our district that is different than those who have, graduated high school already or in college or in the workforce. And to be able to engage with your city council person and share your perspective is just as important, even if you're not voting. And then take that and expand it to our public schools and help students understand the importance of being engaged, right? Young adults are not voting in the ways that they need to vote. 18 to 30-year-olds are not turning out numbers to be engaged. They don't see it as important, and they don't see the process as something valuable anymore. So it's twofold. It's making sure that we are promoting civic engagement in our schools, and it's creating opportunities through a youth advisory council that would meet with elected officials and share that key perspective as well.
Let me just say, okay, and so for the next two questions, since you started answering first, we're going to swap and then follow for the next two questions. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, neighbors. My name is Paul Marino. Glad to share the forum tonight with our new leaders potentially for the city. My question is one of history and identity. If each of the candidates could share with us the historical political figure in American history you look towards as an exemplar for the city council person you'd like to be, and share with us why. And candidate Thompson, if you go into some specifics, since you're a history teacher, the city the last couple of years went through a huge trauma. We removed the statue of Teddy Roosevelt from the Natural History Museum. Could you share with us what you did to try to stop that, or what happened within the public school system? I think it shows us that there's a great lacking in an appreciation of what's valuable in our history and our leaders.
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
And just so that everyone can hear when they're back.
I'll start with the Teddy Roosevelt issue first, and then answer the historical figure question. I was not in a place to have any influence over that decision whatsoever for removing the statue at the American History Museum. What I will say about that issue, though, is that I believe as a history teacher, it's important to put people into the context of their time, right? And so I believe that history is something to be learned from, not something to diminish, and being able to understand people's place in time and think of their contributions and the ways that they could have been better in hindsight and learn from that are important. From a historical perspective, I passionately would like to emulate someone like FDR, who did not tinker around the edges, and when we needed deep reforms to help people, was able to come in and make very systemic reforms that got to the root causes of issues instead of applying yet another band-aid solution. So many of the issues that we have in our city government right now is adding another band-aid solution on top of another band-aid solution on top of another band-aid solution, never really addressing what is the root cause of that problem. So it's really not time to tinker around the edges with things like our education system or our transportation system or housing affordability issues, and think deeply and outside of the box
So the person that I look up to in history would be Margaret Thatcher, because she's bold, unapologetic, resilient. You know, especially for a woman, you really have to be relentless. You don't ask for permission. You just forge ahead. You don't take no for an answer, and you stand up for what you believe in, and you don't fold. So that's the kind of leader that I look up to, the kind of leader I aspire to be. I don't know much about the statue, to be honest, so I cannot comment on that, but I'm very fond of Teddy Roosevelt. Thank you.
Any rebuttal?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Next question, please. And state your name.
FYI, the RERA website is down, by the way.
What?
The RERA website is down, by the way. Try clicking on it, but anyway.
What?
It would be better, I think, if these people with questions face the audience. Yes, if you could-
Okay, then we'll do it that way.
if you go on the
Okay?
other side of the desk. Yes.
Okay, so let's pull the table back a little bit then. We're improvising. Okay, thank you. Okay.
So, hi everyone, my name is Chris Satch, and I am a small local business owner here on Roosevelt Island. I'm the founder and CEO of NYC Plant Health. And my business depends on transportation to and from the island for both myself as well as for my associates. Candidates, what are you doing for the tram to allow preferential boarding for residents? And what are you doing for the larger MTA system in general, for the F train especially, which comes to this island? Thank you.
We can stand over there, just because I think the candidates want to come up, and maybe if you have a follow-up to that, sir? Sir, if you'd like to just stand up, in case there's a follow-up, I just want to make sure they answer your questions. So, you're going to, Collin, you're first?
Yeah, sure. I would also like to ask a question. That's kind of going off script, but I first want to say on the issue of the tram, that is an issue that clearly has a lot of interest in this room. I hear a lot of applause when this question is asked, and I know that there are a lot of different opinions about the best solution moving forward. My understanding with this issue, and I know it's complex because of the governance of Roosevelt Island, which is in this quasi-state between the state and the city and transportation, yada yada, is that there has been a lot of passing of the buck of this issue between different agencies, well-intended or not intentional at all. And it is a reflection of a larger issue where city agencies and state agencies need to come together, have discourse with people, hold meetings like this, talk about the solutions, and come to a meaningful agreement together, knowing there's a lot of different opinions on this topic, right? So I would start there. It's including the community in the process, having conversations with them, bringing all of the stakeholders together, and talk about a solution. When it comes to the MTA as a whole, and more broadly, you're not going to find a candidate who is more passionate about reforming the MTA than I am, and that's long before I was running for office. My partner can vouch for me. It's the thing I complain most about. And I feel that although it may start to sound a bit like I'm standing on one soapbox tonight, that agency is defunct. It is a bureaucratic mess that we have pumped money into and pumped money into and pumped money into. And it's really hard for Democrats, of which a party of which I belong to stand and say, even though we have controlled this agency and this government for a decade, it's not working, right? Or something's not working. And being honest with people and saying, you know what, this isn't working and maybe we need to fix it, is the first place to start with that. We're about to start the Q expansion on the Upper East Side. It'll be the most expensive subway expansion in world history, only beating its own previous record at about $2 billion per mile. The MTA then extorted people for an additional amount of money recently through congestion pricing, and in the interim, also then announced a $300 million contract with an outside consultancy to tell them how to build a subway. Why doesn't the MTA know how to build a subway? That's my question, right? So I believe that we need to bring subways and buses back under local control. or think outside the box about what we do with that. The MTA is literally not even able to expand public transportation or improve public transportation. They're barely maintaining what we already have. And until we start thinking about new solutions, we're not going to have any of the things that you and I want in terms of public transportation.
Okay. Let me tell you what I've been doing. So a week ago, I only learned of the issue when I met Frank. It was actually my very first time guilty in Roosevelt Island. I've never been here before. And when I met Frank, he told me all about the hurdles you guys have. And, you know, the first thing, it took me forever to get here on the F train. It doesn't run very well. Second, he said that there is no pedestrian walkway on the 59th Street. Even though there is a walkway, we can't get on it, only bicyclists, right? And third, he made me aware of the issues in the summer with the tram, and he also explained to me that to no avail, he addressed this to all the Democratic people we have in office, you know, State Assembly, Julie Menon, as well as the State Senator, Kruger. And nobody's doing anything, nobody replied at all. So I actually, the very next day, went to a very lovely former Governor Patak dinner, and I was fortunate enough not only to meet him and talk to him, but also I sat at a table with a man whose business card reads, "We build New York." So he said that it's a very feasible solution to build a staircase or perhaps a spiral ramp or an elevator, and technically an elevator is kind of grandfathered in. You guys had an elevator before it was destroyed. It was destroyed in 1970, and in 1974 the bridge became a landmark. So technically, you can potentially get that going again. Obviously, it's the city agency that owns it. So I am actually in process of setting up a meeting with Yadaris, I'm saying his name wrong, Rodriguez? Yadaris, sorry. Thank you. And for the tram, obviously it's not an MTA issue, it's not a DOT issue, it's a am I saying it wrong? REOC, right? REOC. Okay. So what's going on there is that, you know, REOC is controlling the island, but they're controlled by the state. So I have to, when I meet Pataki again for a one-on-one meeting, to see what he will advise me to do. But obviously, if state government have a discretionary access, you know, a voice to change the decision that right now you have from REOC saying that their hands are tied. So that's what I would do. I would make sure one of, you know, these solutions comes to fruition, if not both.
Let me just ask, was there any rebuttal to any comments you just heard?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Okay. Next speaker, how are you?
Hi, I'm Margie Smith. I'd like to know from the two of the candidates, since they say all politics are local, how much do you really know about Roosevelt Island? Specifically, our political structure, which is everything stems from that. And a big issue that we're facing, how detailed have you gotten into the problem of our expiring ground lease between the city and the state? What?
First, I've gone the last.
Right, I think you did too, so now we're up to Alina.
So I came here to learn. I came here to hear what you have to say, and I've been pretty transparent. I've never been to Roosevelt Island until last week, and everything that I've learned was from Frank, doing my own research, and actually reaching out to public officials and people that are in government agencies. And I'm a quick learner, and I learned a lot. So basically, for your land lease issue, and I, as somebody that owns real estate myself, would have a hard time with this. You know, I own properties, it's how I make my passive income, and it would be very uncomfortable knowing what the future holds, that you don't own the ground where your investments are on. Obviously, I understand the complexity of the situation, and, you know, it's crazy in a sense, but so recently there was a bill that was just approved. I don't know if you've heard about it. It was just approved by City Council. It was $4 billion that was approved from City Council and $1 billion from the state agency. And there's an allocation for Michelama and affordable housing, and it's actually $2 billion. And I actually did the math before I came here because I wanted to know what it would mean for Roosevelt Island. And you guys have 4 buildings, right? No, 4. More than 4.
We got no mention on those.
Oh, you don't have much long. It expired. Okay. Okay. So when did it? So, but you do have affordable housing still, or you don't?
Yeah, one development that's got maybe one that's got.
Okay. Okay. So this bill would include funding for any building that is still in the affordable housing category. So there would be some compensation in that. But what I talked to Frank about is that I understand obviously the importance of starting conversations early and renegotiating the land lease. I know it's sometime until it expires, but it's important to kind of at least draft some sort of understanding and to understand whether it's going to stay with the state or if the city is going to get it back so that people are comfortable and feel secure. And that would be my priority as a city council person, to kind of get that going and not put it on the back end. I know a lot of people, you know, they concentrate on different things, but as someone that also owns real estate, that would be important to me, so I totally understand, you know, your concern. And I understand that you have to take care of buildings that are middle age, and that eats up a lot of your reserves. So I would be kind of pushing for some kind of tax abatement or anything that the city or state can do to kind of alleviate concerns of unaffordability when it comes time to massive repairs. So that's what I know so far, but anything else you'd like to share with me, I'm happy to learn and understand better.
Thank you for that question. I will start by saying no. I mean, it's not a secret that I'm not from Roosevelt Island. None of the 3 candidates in this race are from Roosevelt Island, right? What I will say is, and I'll pull the curtain back just a little bit about the inner workings of campaigns and politics, right? In primary elections, particularly when an incumbent is facing re-election, to then share a stage with a candidate like me, a grassroots candidate, gives that candidate some legitimacy that they are on a stage as equals that the other candidate in this race didn't want to happen tonight. So there's one candidate, although none of us are from Roosevelt Island, there's one candidate here tonight listening to concerns and hearing conversations and having a dialogue about Roosevelt Island in the time that I've spent here in the last year, getting to know this neighborhood better as I've prepared to run, and one is not. Secondly, with the land lease, it is going to be an effective rent increase for all of you for a variety of reasons. If you own property on Roosevelt Island and are looking to sell that, it's going to be detrimental in your ability to sell your unit because people are not going to want to buy a unit that they have no guarantee to have, right? Beyond a certain time, if there's no guarantee in place that the lease is going to be expanded. For those of you who rent, and there needs to be a capital improvement project done to a building, and the building needs to borrow $5 million to repair the roof, for example, and the rate at which they can borrow that money is significantly increased, those interest rates, because they're having to borrow on a shorter mortgage, on a shorter note, because there is no guarantee that this island is even going to have its status in 40 years, affects the rate at which banks loan you money. Do you think that the developers are going to eat that cost or pass it on to the hardworking tenants in that building, right? So this is something that's going to have detrimental economic impacts on people in Roosevelt Island, and city government, as you know, does not move at some warp speed, and we're a couple of years away from a magical 40-year window here where it's going to start having economic impacts in your lives, and city government really, up until that statement I heard read tonight, hasn't been discussing it, period.
Any rebuttal? Okay, so, thank you, Margie. So let me just say, I know I'm looking at the clock right now and it's 8 o'clock. However, I did actually permit the space out for a bit longer, so we can go, just in case the questions were good, and it sounds like we're getting good questions here. So we can go for a good 20, 25 minutes if we need to. And if not, that's fine also. I just wanted you to feel comfortable asking questions. Next, please. There you go.
Hi, folks. You know, it's very short, and I've lived here longer than the tram. Can you hear me? Okay. I wanted to clarify clarify something that you just stated, and that is that council member isn't here this evening not because she didn't want to share a stage with you. Okay, council member isn't here not because she didn't want to share a stage with you, but because she actually had another event that conflicted with tonight's date. I wanted to find out, because we're happy to see new faces, but we need real progress on Roosevelt Island's issues. And so I'd like for you to tell us what you think are our 3 most important issues that confront Roosevelt Islanders and what you would do about those 3 issues. You've touched on 2. What additional issues do you feel Roosevelt Islanders face, and what will you do about them?
Thank you for the question. Okay, so this is question number 6, so I think we're now still in Alina. Yes, and then the next question will be Collin.
Okay, thank you. So, it's basically what the third thing that we didn't cover. Okay. Because we talked about the tram, which is very important. I believe I have the network and the access to get some solution for you as soon as I could possibly do it. If I lived here, that would be my main goal as well. Obviously, the land, I own real estate. I have investments. I get it, and I would fight for that as if it were my property, because I understand exactly what that's like. But the third thing, and it's actually part of my platform, it's small business. There's unfair. You guys are protected here in a way because you guys have more affordable housing, and but rents in Manhattan are insane. It pushes people out. The small business as well as residential. So for small business, actually I'm starting a coalition for small business. There is a legislation that for 30 years has been attempted to get passed by city council. And Julie Menon was the chair of the committee at the time. And what she did to that bill is she just did not even present it to city council to be voted on. And that bill would have protected small business from getting evicted, essentially. And for unfair rent hike, people that build a business, they come here for decades, they invest, it's generational, and they cannot keep up with the increases, and they're just getting kicked out, and they have to start all over. There's bureaucracy in setting up a new business. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of old codes that don't transfer, even if when you switch locations. And it's just a real disheartening to service. Somebody like me who's an immigrant and whose family also had lots of small businesses in New York City. I understand it, and I would, totally support this. So that is what I'm fighting for on a larger scale. I'm starting a coalition. I want this bill to be seen, and we want to rectify what Julie Menon did. Is she had a vital role in not letting it come to the city council to get voted on. There was verbal support on this bill, but as a commissioner, she just didn't let it see the light of day, so.
Yep. Collin?
As you mentioned, I addressed land lease, so we talked a little bit about that. I think that's primary issue number 1, especially from an economic standpoint. Issue number 2, we've also kind of talked on is transportation issues with the tramway, right? And I believe that we need to start addressing, and I would love to see a very clear delineation of roles between REOC and the state and the city, and come together with some plan of who is responsible for what, who owns what service, where does the buck stop with what agency, so that there's not a passing of the buck and blame passed around, and no decision ever reached when things like this happen, right? I'm sure as residents of Roosevelt Island, it feels frustrating to feel like this issue has been ongoing, and one agency or one group says it's the fault of this person, or there's a rule here that can't happen or allow something to happen, and another agency says, well, it's the fault of this group. And having very clear delineated roles for accountability so that people in Roosevelt Island know who is accountable for making decisions for your life needs to be in place. And then thirdly, I think emergency preparedness. You are obviously landlocked, you're an island, right? I don't think New York City is prepared for evacuations if there were natural disasters with climate change happening. You have limited access in and off the island. And those conversations, as we think about the effects of climate change, rising sea levels, which will affect our rivers as well here in the East River. Those conversations aren't happening, and making sure that Roosevelt Islanders are protected and that there is a plan to get you off the island in case of an emergency. And I think maybe to add one additional point to that, I know that there's a lot of interest in Roosevelt Island for electing REOC board members, and that's something I would certainly be interested in exploring as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Frank, can I?
Okay.
Frank,
Yes?
can I ask?
Oh, go ahead. So, question number 7, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could comment on general citywide issues regarding congestion pricing, regarding New York as a sanctuary city, and just regarding safety, crime and safety in New York City, and what as a council person you could do about that.
So I do not like congestion pricing, and I hope Donald Trump is going to really push to get rid of it as he's been trying. Obviously, the governor's office has been pushing back really hard on it. I think it's just absolutely ridiculous. It really adds up to the monthly expense that somebody has, just going to work every day. I would vote it out. And if, we're ever in a position that we can do that, I, of course, would support getting rid of it altogether. And then your second question was?
Sanctuary city, New York is a sanctuary city, and should New York City agencies cooperate with ICE?
So as someone who is an immigrant, my family came here illegally, and I obviously have a soft, heart for immigrants. I believe that, certain immigrants that have made a life here, even though they're here illegally, but they've been here for years, they raised their kids here, they're educated their kids here, they should be protected. So I think a sanctuary city is okay, but it needs to be a smart sanctuary city, because it really interferes with our safety. I think it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, right? But there's definitely issues that have been arising for the open border crisis. But I also see that there's unfairness, people getting plucked out of their cars, out of their homes, out of their schools that are not a threat to society just because they're here illegally for 10 or 20 years. I think they should be left alone. That's personally my opinion. So I believe in changing the sanctuary city to make it broader, to protect the people that should be protected under that.
Just what about the crime issue and dealing?
And so with the crime issue, that's kind of related to, a lot of it is homeless, right? A lot of the stuff we see in the news is the homeless that push people in the train, stab people, they're violent, and they're deranged, right? So we have a 3-tier solution for people like that are really a threat to society and to themselves. They should be taken to somewhere where they can have long-term care, they would have a roof over their head, they would have food, they would have the treatment that they need, and they would make our streets safer. They would reduce the police burden. I also believe that citizens should have pepper spray. I don't know why it's legal. We don't have pepper spray in New York. We can have pepper spray in Florida. It's ridiculous that people are able to protect themselves on the subway late at night, especially in a city that is, like that.
Thank you. I'll move over to Chris. Congestion pricing. The conversation I was having with Chris. I am, in an ideal world, we would have fewer cars on the street. I believe in that. I believe that reducing emissions from cars is one of the most meaningful ways that we can help protect our environment in New York City. And throwing money at the MTA is not the solution. I passionately believe we could give the MTA $1 trillion and they wouldn't know what to do with it. So that's what challenges me about the MTA, is that we're throwing money at a solution. We're burdening working class people with yet another tax. And my party, and I'm most critical of the Democratic Party as a Democrat, have been in the era of tax and spend. Instead of taking ownership for the mismanagement of the MTA, let's pass that burden off to someone else. So I want to be able to expand public transportation, and I want to be able to provide it to areas that don't even have it, right, in parts of our city where you're walking 45 minutes to an hour to get to a subway station. But at the same time, throwing more money at an agency that doesn't know how to manage it is not the solution to that problem. Secondly,
Well, but yes or no, are you in favor of the congestion pricing system as it currently exists?
as it currently exists, no, because I don't think throwing money at the MTA is how we're going to fix that agency. That agency needs to be retooled before we keep pumping money into it.
Okay, and New York City as a sanctuary city and cooperation with ICE?
I believe that sanctuary cities, or the term sanctuary city, much like congestion pricing, has been a buzzword for either side to retreat to the extremes of these conversations, and I think we can be meaningful about them. I think that no country in the world would allow people who are in their country illegally and commit crimes to remain in that country. And I don't believe that we should allow schools or hospitals or houses of worship to be places of target. People who went to the courthouse yesterday in Lower Manhattan were targeted, right? Undocumented people who were showing up for court cases, trying to do the right thing, were being targeted. That is important, right? And so life is gray, and it's not a black and white this or that. It can be true, two things at one time, that people who are here and are contributing to our society need a faster and easier way to become citizens, and they need to be protected, especially in vulnerable places like houses of worship and schools. And those who are here, who are doing crime, do not need to be allowed to stay in our country. And that is not a radical idea. That's literally what the other 190 countries of the world would do. When it comes to safety, I know that theft is up 17% in this district in the last 2 years. That's disproportionately affecting our small family-owned businesses. And I believe that a lot of our safety issues are around a culture of enforcement, and a lot of culture work needs to happen in every area of city government, where city agencies just aren't providing or doing what they need to be doing. And I think that's a top-down tone setting from the mayor's office, from the city council, to enforce the laws that we already have on the books, particularly around like pedestrian safety, I know, which is a major concern in this district.
Thank you. Any rebuttal? Okay. And then, so Collin, you're going to be answering this, because Alina just answered this one first, so you're going to take the next question. Okay. And let me just say, for the audience here, so we're going to take our last speaker, or last questioner, since he's the only one here, okay? And then we're going to have closing statements afterwards, okay? So, your question, sir.
So I asked my last question to lead into my next question. And so just to begin with, just a side comment on congestion pricing. Yes, I do have a car. Yes, I do drive for my business, and I am pro-congestion pricing because it makes it way easier for me to find parking. So I don't get tickets, so I don't have to pass that cost on to my clients. That said, I heard 2-0 burgers from both candidates. One side said, oh, well, we're going to get together, we're going to be friends of friends, and we're going to kumbaya and figure something out. No plan. The other side, hey, let's get an elevator on the bridge, which is great, but you know, after a long day of going from client to client, my feet hurt, my associates' feet hurt, and I'm very certain that a lot of the, you know, elderly would not really want to walk halfway across the Queensboro Bridge to take an elevator down to then walk more miles across the island just to get home. So what I really wanted to hear was an actual, like, we're going to throw 2 more cars onto the existing cable car, we're going to ride more F trains and throw an R in there for fun, right? That would have been a solution. But that leads into my next question, since there wasn't really any transparency in either of the answers. My next question is, what are you both going to do about government transparency? With the fact that RERA website was down, which I know is, you know, it's its own thing.
We're working on it.
I know you're working on it, I know. But I'm using
There's
that.
only so many resources, yes, I'm sorry.
I got you. No, you're fine. But, you know, I go onto the government website, and I go on to, you know, the candidates' websites, and I look and I do my research, and I see, you know, what are you going to do to make things like easier? Like I look at the news and I see it's kind of a black box of stuff happens and then my life doesn't change. So how will I as a citizen get more transparency into what the government is doing?
Thank you for the question. Okay, so Collin?
With transparency, I believe it starts with being in the community and giving and sharing information, being accessible, being open and honest, and creating spaces for people to come and ask questions for their city council person, for the city council person to share updates. I know that 2 city council persons ago, Ben Kalos was really great about going into buildings, had been in your building, right, and would come around. And I would love to bring that back to District 5, an opportunity for people to engage, to ask questions openly and honestly, have these public discussions and dialogues, and then to have concerns addressed in a very engaging way. So I think that we start with transparency by creating a space for you and I to have conversations like this, right, and ask questions and share what's going on. And I appreciate you holding me accountable to the transportation issue. As it was pointed out earlier today, I don't live on Roosevelt Island. I'm not taking the tram every day. I don't have as intimate familiarity with it as you might or others in the room might. And if Frank would allow me, what would be your solution to this as someone who takes this every day and experiences it every day? What would you like to see from your city council person on this issue?
I want priority boarding for residents. I want more trains run. And if God willing, you can throw on a couple more cable cars. Can't do that? All right, well then, that's why.
2 tables, 2 cars.
Whatever, anyway, more trains and, priority boarding for residents, that would be great. There's already a petition going around, I've heard. Don't know what came of that or if any of you have heard of it, but there's a petition around there with a lot of signatures for priority boarding for residents, which would really help us out because we get mobbed. I've been shoved, I've been borderline assaulted by these tourists who come on, and I welcome tourists, great, fine, whatever, but I need to get home, and I, shouldn't be pushed aside. I live here, I pay taxes here, everyone here pays taxes here. I should be able to get home just like everyone else in the 5 boroughs does.
Have there been public forums or opportunities?
Yes.
There's going to be a protest on June 8th underneath the tree line, 3 o'clock on June 8th. Come on out, we're doing signage. As a matter of fact, we're doing signage this Saturday. We're going to have a table out front where we're going to be making the signs for the protest the following Sunday.
Where the signage going to be?
We're doing the signs out in front, like where the flea market is, and the farmer's market. We're going to be out there, giving, the residents an opportunity with their kids and everything to, draw pictures and make signs to, for the protest on the 8th. So I'll let everybody know.
I would just suggest candidates, that starlight over there, okay? So
More bodies and hands on the table.
if you can follow up with her.
Signs that we need to do the protest on that Sunday at 3 o'clock on the Manhattan side would be great. Absolutely amazing. That's what we want, that's what we need. And it's called Transit.
Listen, I started this by saying I am here to listen. No elected official has every answer, and although a lot of them like to say they do, they're lying. And what is important is for those who are supposed to be providing public service through elected office is to have the skill of decision making, show up, listen to concerns, hear these ideas, use that information to work collaboratively to make a decision on behalf of people, right? I don't have every single answer. I'm not going to, and no one does. And if anyone does, they're lying to you, right? I don't live on Roosevelt Island. I'll reestablish that. But I am passionate about listening to people in this district, hearing the concerns, and then using that information to make a decision. And it starts by showing up and having the conversations.
Thank you. Alina?
So I'm just going to start with the tram question first because the reason you guys don't have priority boarding is because REOC told Frank, Frank told me that it's because in your agreement with REAC, it says that they're a common carrier, so they cannot create priority for residents and workers. However, I took that up with people at the Pataki dinner, and they said, well, that's just ridiculous. Obviously, of course, they should have priority boarding. They live here, they work here. Why is it so difficult to do, right? And so I obviously did some research, and the only way to change it, as I touched upon it, is it has to be a government, the governor's office. The governor's office has to tell REAC, do this. REAC cannot make that decision. They're bound by this contract, and that's why they can't do anything. So we need to go above REAC. That is why I am prioritizing this. I'm going to meet with former Governor Pataki. He's going to give me advice, and he's going to help me understand how to navigate. Obviously, I know he's not in office anymore, but he still has access to a lot of influential people and relationships. And that is actually a very easy thing to accomplish through the right networks, which is, I'm on it. I'm on it. Transparency. I love that question. I think we need to doge this city. So this city operates in a budget of $112 billion, and it is the most inefficient city. I'll just give you an example. We have a population of 8 million residents and $112 billion. So per capita, per resident, the city has allocated $13,000. Tokyo has a population density of 14 million residents, and they operate on a $54 billion budget. So their per capita is $3,000. Who's been to Tokyo? It is the most cleanest, beautiful, efficient, well-run city because they are focused on the collective. I don't know what these people that are in power right now are doing, but they are doing something different than they should be. Because the money that they're collecting, $112 billion, I don't know where the hell it's going, right? For example, we know that Mayor Adams spent $6 billion of our budget supporting the, well, you know more about it, but, okay. So with the illegal migrants that came here, to house them, to, give them, because we're a sanctuary city. So that's a little bit ridiculous, but we have $112 billion. There's a lot of bad agencies that are getting big payouts. I'm running because I'm pissed off at family court. And even though as a city council person, I can't influence city court directly, I can influence their agencies. Their agencies is ACS, Child Protective Services, which city council allocates a substantial amount of budget to. And just like you, they give you a very superficial view of where this money is going. Even when every year these agencies come to city council and they're supposed to disclose how they're spending the money and what they're doing, the questions are not the right questions that are asked of them. On city council, I would make sure that we do a really deep, investigation of how these agencies spend this money and where this money is going. So when I say DOGE is doing, in the federal government, they're reallocating budgets, they're trying to understand how there's mismanagement of funds. The same thing is happening in our city. So I'm with you. I believe there should be more accountability, and it's not that we need to charge people, tolls or or raise taxes or all this stuff. There is money. It's just not spent correctly.
Okay, thank you. So we are now at the